Hello everyone, welcome back, and today I'm going to show you how I made this multi-stitch jumper, and thank you so much for watching today, and I hope you enjoy. So I started by getting this purple yarn, and I just began by making a slip knot as usual. And then I just inserted a 6mm crochet hook into that loop and then pulled the loose thread to tighten the knot, and then I just started making a chain. And I made the chain 23 inches long. So I got the 23 inches from measuring the width of a jumper that I like the size of. So basically this width of a jumper, and mine was 23 inches. So for the second row I then just chained one, and then I did a double crochet into each stitch of this chain. And to do a double crochet, all you need to do is yarn over, insert your hook into the next stitch, yarn over, pull up the first two loops, and then yarn over and pull through the second two loops on your hook. And just repeat that process into every single stitch of this chain. And for the next row I just did exactly the same, so I just did chain one and then turned my work, and then I just did a double crochet into every single stitch of the previous row. So once I'd finished that row of double crochets, I then got some white yarn, as you can see, and I made a loop on the crochet hook, and then I just pulled the loop through the loop that was the purple loop that was already on the crochet hook, and then I'm just pulling that purple loose thread, as you can see. And then made a chain of 3 with the white yarn, and then I inserted the crochet hook into the first stitch of the last row, and I did a double crochet into that stitch, and then I did another double crochet into the same stitch. So there's 2 double crochets and 1 chain 3, and then I chained 2 and I skipped 2 stitches from the previous row, and then I did 3 double crochets into that one stitch, and then I did the same again, so chain 2, 1, 2, skipped 2 stitches on the purple row, and then I inserted my hook into the third stitch from the stitch you just crocheted into, and then I did 3 double crochets into that one stitch. So basically what you're gonna do is chain 2 after every 3 double crochets you do into one stitch, and then skip 2 stitches, so you're then doing the 3 double crochets into the third stitch from the last stitch you just did the 3 double crochets into. And I just did that all the way along the row until I got to the end. So for the next stitch of the pattern, I got this multicolored yarn, and again I made a loop as I did before and inserted my crochet hook as so, and then I pulled that loop through the white yarn loop that was already on my hook, pulled that loose white thread to tighten it, and then I made a chain one with that multicolored yarn. Right now it's a light purple. I then made a triple crochet stitch into the first stitch of the white row, as you can see. So to do a triple crochet, what you do is you basically yarn over twice, so you have 3 loops on your hook. Then you insert your hook into the first stitch, yarn over and pull through the first 2 loops, and then yarn over, pull through the next 2 loops, and then yarn over and pull through the remaining 2 loops on your hook. So it's basically very similar to a double crochet. You're just yarning over twice at the start of the stitch and then yarning over and pulling up once more the 2 loops than you would if you were doing a double crochet. So again, I just did that stitch into every single stitch of the previous row, and as you can see, this is basically the pattern that I used to make this jumper. I just repeated it. So for the next row, I then did the purple row again. So I got that purple yarn that was already there from the previous purple row that we did before, and then I made a loop with that purple yarn and pulled it through the loop that was already on my hook, which was the multicolored yarn, and then I just started doing double crochets into every single stitch of the previous row with that purple yarn. And a little disclaimer, this is probably kind of confusing if you are using this, because the multicolored yarn in this sequence is like a light purple, but when I say purple yarn, I'm meaning the dark purple, and the multicolored yarn, I'm meaning that lilac kind of light purple yarn that is in this sequence. And so for the next row, I did again a double crochet into each stitch with that purple yarn, and I did another row after this as well. So I basically did 3 rows of double crochets with this purple yarn. So once I had completed the 3rd row of the double crochets, I then got the white yarn that I had left from the previous row using the white yarn, and then again I pulled a loop, and then I pulled the white yarn loop through the purple loop that was already on my hook, as you can see, and I just let that purple yarn just fall to the side. And then I began the same pattern as I had before with the white yarn. So that was doing a chain 3 and then doing 2 double crochets into the first stitch, then chaining 2 and doing 3 double crochets in the 3rd stitch from the stitch you just crocheted into, so skipping 2 stitches basically. And I just continued to do this pattern, so doing 3 rows of double crochets with the purple yarn and then doing the series of the white yarn, so doing the 3 double crochets into every third stitch and doing a chain 2 in between the 3 double crochets, and then doing a row of triple crochets with the multicolored yarn. And I just continued this pattern until it was 46 inches long, and I got it from this measurement of a jumper I liked again. So essentially I just measured vertically from top to bottom of a jumper that I liked, the same one I used for the other measurement, and that was 46 inches. So once I'd got to that length, I then just cut the yarn and pulled a knot like so, and that was the front panel finished. So I then just cut any of the ends, so of the other colored yarn as well, so the white and the purple. And then I started on the sleeves. So for the sleeves I got this, again, the same purple yarn, and I began making a slip knot with this purple yarn and inserting the 6mm crochet hook into this knot and pulling it tight. And then I began making a chain, and this chain I made to the width that I wanted the sleeves to be. So essentially the circumference of your arm, so it should be long enough to wrap around the widest part of your arm. And for me that was 16 inches, so I made this chain 16 inches long. So it would be this measurement, but obviously times by 2. So if you're using a jumper you like, just take the width of the sleeve and times by 2. And once I'd finished the chain, I did exactly the same as I did for the body. I turned my work and did a double crochet into every single stitch of the chain. And then for the third row I did the same. I did a double crochet into every single stitch of the previous row. And for the next sequence of the pattern, I did exactly the same as I did for the body. So making a loop with the white yarn and pulling it through the purple yarn loop that was already on my hook, and just letting that purple yarn fall. And then I did a chain 3 and did 2 double crochets into the first stitch of the row, and then chain 2 and did 3 double crochets into the third stitch from the stitch I just crocheted into, and doing a chain 2 between each of the 3 double crochets. for the next sequence, I did exactly the same again. I got the multicolored yarn that I'd been using for the body, and I just made a loop again with the yarn, and I pulled the loop through that white yarn loop that was already on my hook, like so. And then I just began the exact same pattern again of doing triple crochets into every single stitch of the row using the multicolored yarn, and in this sequence it was a light pink. And I just continued with this pattern until the length was 25 inches, and that was the length that I measured from a jumper of the arm section. So I made 2 body panels and then 2 panels for the sleeves, and then I just placed them like so. So the 2 body panels facing each other, the tops facing each other, and then the sleeves on either side. And then I got some pink yarn and I just made a slip knot and got a 3.5mm crochet hook and inserted it into the slip knot. And then I just began by single crocheting the sleeves to the body part. So I basically single crocheted the top of the sleeve, so where your shoulder would be, and I crocheted that to where the body panels would meet, so basically the side of your collar, and the middle of your shoulder sleeve part is the gap between the 2 body parts, so where your head would go through. And yeah, to single crochet the 2 panels together, I just inserted my hook into one side of the panel and inserted it into the other side of the panel at the same time, and then yarn over and pulled up through the 2 loops on your hook. And I left a gap, as you can see, so when I had crocheted one body to the sleeve, I then just cut the yarn and pulled a knot, and then I started crocheting the other body panel to the sleeve as well. And once I'd finished crocheting the both the panels to the sleeve, I then just cut the yarn and pulled through a knot, as you can see. I then folded it over, so basically the two body panels were on top of each other. And then again, I got my pink yarn and I made a slip knot and inserted a 3mm crochet hook. And then I just began single crocheting the two body panels together like so. And starting from the bottom, basically inserting my hook into both panels and then yarning over and pulling up the two loops on the hook. And I did this the whole way up the body panel until I got to the armpit piece. And when I got to the armpit piece, I then just began single crocheting the sleeve together. So single crocheting each side of the sleeve together to make a sleeve and not a panel. And then when I got to the end, I just cut the yarn and pulled a knot through. And I did this whole process on the other side, so sewing the other sleeve to the two body pieces and then sewing the body piece together and then the two of the sides of the sleeve together. And once I'd done that, I turned it all to the right way up because it was inside out before. And if you wanted, like, I could have just left the jumper like that and it would have been fine, but I wanted it to sit a bit better around my neck, so I just began adding to the pattern. So I made a slip knot with the multicolored yarn and getting my 6mm crochet hook and inserting it into the slip knot. And then I actually did only single crochets for the first round of this, just because I was wanting to make it tighter. And I also made it tighter by doing a decrease every 10 stitches. The top of the jumper, and I did a decrease every 10 stitches. And once I got to the 10th stitch, I then did a decrease, and to do a decrease, you insert your hook into the next stitch, and then you also insert your stitch into the stitch next to it. So you basically insert it into 2 stitches at once, and then you just do a normal single crochet, so yarning over and pulling up the 2 loops on your hook. And once I'd finished the row, I then cut the yarn and pulled through the knot. I then got some white yarn and again made a slip knot and inserted my 6mm crochet hook, and then I just began doing the same pattern as I did before with the white yarn, so doing a chain 3 to start with and then doing 2 double crochets into the same stitch and then skipping 2 stitches and chaining 2 and then doing 3 double crochets into the same stitch. And I just repeated that the whole way around the row, but again the same as the previous rows, I did a decrease stitch when I got to the 10th stitch. I yarned over and then I inserted my hook into the 3rd stitch from the one I just crocheted into and also the stitch next to it, and then I did 3 double crochets into both of the stitches, as you can see. So essentially the same as before, but just inserting the hook into the 2 stitches next to each other, and that just creates a decrease. And I did that the whole way around for this, and doing a decrease at every 10 stitches, as the same as the previous rows. And then again cutting the yarn and pulling it up when I was finished. Then got some purple yarn, made a slip knot and inserted my 6mm crochet hook as usual, and then I just began doing single crochets all the way around this row with purple yarn. And I know before for the pattern I was using a double crochet, but since I wanted to make it even tighter I did a single crochet, just because this was the last pattern row that I did. And again I did a decrease every 10 stitches and I did 3 rows of single crochets. And again doing a decrease every 10 stitches, and to decrease you insert your hook into one stitch and insert it into the next one and do a single crochet into both of the stitches, so but only doing 1 single crochet for both, and that creates a decrease, as you can see. And once I had finished the 3 rows of the single crochet in purple, I then cut the yarn and pulled through a knot. And then I just weaved in all the ends, as you can see. And that was the jumper finished. And again, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed.